Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I remember it because it wasn't that long ago. So how many people are new to investing in real estate? Raise your hand. That's awesome. I tell you, as myself as the example, if you have done nothing, you really don't know anything much about real estate, in a few years from now, you could be living a dramatically different life. All you have to do is what Christina was just talking about, and that's taking action. I won't talk the whole night just about that, but it's that important. You just keep taking steps. So yeah, no, I was, like I said in the bio, 2012, I started as a full-time investor in 2012, which means I was a hopeful investor since 2004. But in 2012, I quit my job before I had made any money in real estate. I had 2 kids at home and a wife who was a stay-at-home mom who allowed me to do that. She's a pretty special woman. She's a pretty special woman. So she had vision that we'd be successful. But yeah, I quit my job before I'd done anything, or before I'd made any money. And since then, I've done, it's not 100, I counted them the other day, it was 90, I've done 95 flips since 2012, which is, it's close to 100. So give me a little leeway. So let me just get this out of the way. I got a legal disclosure here that I'm not an attorney, I am not a CPA, I'm not giving legal advice. If I encourage people to seek legal advice for anything in real estate that's going to impact your financial stuff. I'm going to be sharing how I have been successful in real estate over the last little bit. Take that for what it's worth. So, like I said, this is my family. I flip houses and we make babies, apparently, because we have 5 kids. My wife and I. I've got and this one, for whatever reason, it's not very bright, but we just had a baby 2 months ago. So I've got a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 2-month-old. So I'm tired for a lot of reasons. And this is my wife here, and I have 4 boys and 1 little girl. So I stuck at it long enough to have the girl. I'm one of 3 boys. My dad wanted to have a girl, but that was where the lineage ended. So my background, like I said, I moved. I'm originally from Oregon. I moved to Southern California in 2001 to go to a music school, of all things, because there's so much money in music. That's why I chose that route. But while I was in school, I made the decision that I did not want to try to make a living at that. So after school, I got a job at a music-oriented company, and I worked in that company for 10 years. How many people have read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Quite a few. No surprise if you're in this room, you should have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you haven't read it, it's a great book. What was I saying? Somewhere in while I was working in there, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I did not see that my life was headed in the direction that I was hoping, and that's what kind of led me to start getting interested in real estate. I watched, coming from Oregon, looking at house prices from 2004 to 2007 was just staggering for my mind, because the average home price was around $250,000. So I remember watching homes go from, I lived in Monrovia at the time, and I remember watching homes go from like 400, the next year it was 500, then it was 600. It was just crazy. So, but in that time, started in 2004 kind of being interested in real estate, read lots and lots of books, but I didn't really know what on earth I needed to do in order to, are we okay?
He's fixing it.
Okay, thank you. I look funny? He just told me I look funny. Do I look funny?
He's just updating the mic.
So I got interested in real estate, read a bunch of books. Sound familiar to a lot of people, right? Probably a lot of people in this room that are just like that. So let's see here. Didn't know what to do. The downturn happened. I come from a background where I talked about investing with my mom, and we all know the idea of buy low, sell high. I don't know about you, but I remember how it felt in that time. It felt like the world had fallen apart and it was never going to come back. So there's a lot of emotional stuff that goes on. So to become an investor, there's so much personal development that happens. I remember in that time, but I knew kind of when you take out the emotional part in my heart that this was probably going to come back, there was going to be an opportunity. That's where I started really doing things like coming to investment clubs like this. I personally spent a chunk of money to go to through a real estate investment course. I don't necessarily recommend that people do that because there's lots of ways that you can save that money for an actual investment and still learn how to do this. So, anyways, 2010, I think I signed up for that, and by 2012, I felt like I had enough knowledge in order to do real estate, but I needed more time. Lo and behold, I had an opportunity to coordinate my own layoff at the job that I'd been working for 10 years, which I know it all sounds crazy. I sound like I'm crazy, but in all honesty, I'm actually a very conservative person. But apparently I go off into new fields before I make money and quit my job. Yeah, whatever. Life is a journey. So anyways, in 2012, quit the job, and I started doing real estate. In 2012, that was in the middle of the year. By the end of the year, I had 3 houses under contract, where I think I flipped 2 of them and I wholesaled 1 of them. The next year, I did 6 deals, which 2 of them were flips, 4 of them were wholesale deals. The next year, I did 16 flips that next year. We bought them all, flipped them all. And then every year until probably last year, I've done about 20 or so deals a year. All flips. What was that?
Did you buy them all full cash?
I'll talk about how I funded them in just a second, but I'm just trying to give you kind of like the timeline of how that worked, because that's a pretty dramatic change, wouldn't you agree? Right, going from basically, how many people work full-time jobs, right? There's probably quite a few people here, right? How many of you who work full-time jobs wished you didn't work a full-time job, right? I'm one of them, because I work, real estate investing it's a lot of work, But that's kind of the timeline of how I've gotten to today. Now we've done 95 houses, and it's crazy because, like I said, I was literally sitting in the same seats that like you guys were. I would stand up and I would tell people, kind of projecting what I wanted. I told people that I was a syndicator and that I bought apartment complexes because that's what I wanted to do, because I wanted to find people who would help me do that. But what I'm going to talk about tonight is basically how I have been able to fund all of those deals, because if there's one thing that's important in real estate, it's money, right? And a lot of people don't have money in order to get started. I didn't have any money. I did not have enough money to do anything what I've been able to do. So what I've had to do is find people who've been able to fund those deals for me. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. It's something I'm passionate about. I haven't done this talk in a while, so if it's a little bit of clunky or if I trip on my words, give me a little bit of grace. I'm here. I have nothing to sell. We're not going to rush to the back at the end and swipe credit cards. If you want to make a tip, that's fine, but you don't have to. I'm not here to sell anything. What I really want to do in my heart of hearts, there are so many people that have helped me get to where I'm at. Christina is one of them. It's one of the reasons why I come to this meeting, because she has incredible integrity and she really wants to help people succeed. I'm the same. There are so many people who've helped me along the way. I want to help pass that on to other people. So I'd love it to be interactive. If you've got questions, if we get into something, I'm trying to keep everything to be done before 9 o'clock. I can get wordy at times, but I hope there's a lot of value in here for you to walk away with. There's going to maybe be question and answer time at the end, and I'll be here as long as people want to talk. So that's the topic for tonight. And like I said, started in 2012. I flipped in 4 geographic locations. The primary one is Southern California, LA area. I've done probably about 18 houses up in the Bay Area. I've flipped in Austin, Texas, and I've done it in Oregon as well, which is where I'm originally from. Which sounds crazy, but in each one of those places, I've basically had some kind of a team or contacts that I've been able to build off of. And I looked it up. I've raised over $30 million to fund those 95 deals over the last 7 years. So it's quite a bit of money. And like I said, almost none of it has come out of my pocket. So, and when I fund my deals, I am 100% funding my deals. That's my purchase price, my closing costs, the money for the rehab, the money that I'm using for holding costs, money that I'm using to pay back interest payments for my investors too. So it's more than 100% funding on all of those deals. So it can absolutely be done. So funding deals, show me the money. That's what we're here to talk about. So, okay, so just a quick overview. As far as whether it's flips or whether it's rental property, there's a couple of different ways that you fund those deals. One is if you have enough money. I don't think you'd probably be in this room if you were going to self-fund deals. So we're primarily going to focus on how to raise money from other people. So my story, like I said, back in 2012, beginning, what is that? The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of those habits. Anybody read that book? It's a great book. It's been around for a long time for a good reason. One of those, I think it might, no, the first one is be proactive. Second one is begin with the end in mind, right? If you know you want to get somewhere, you start to think about that, and you can kind of reverse engineer and plan back from there. When I got started, it was easy to decide that I needed other people's money because I didn't have money in order to do it. I think I had about $30,000 when I started. And I did invest that in my first deal, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But I had limited funds, right? And even if you've got $1 million, you have a limited fund. So you can't, the scalability is available if you can use other people's money in order to do your deals. So that was, I didn't have the money. I knew I wanted to be able to do multiple projects at one time. And I was thinking about the future. I wanted to be able to, if I can cultivate enough private capital, people who trust me with their money, then I could turn that into bigger kinds of maybe commercial deals or other things down the road. So that was why I chose that route, not just because I didn't have money. There was a couple other reasons in there. So like I said, the very first deal that I bought was in Azusa, and I learned a really valuable lesson about cash flow. I bought a house. I was going to flip it, but people told me that it was in good enough condition that I could probably just sell it to an end customer or an end buyer and not really do much updates to the property. So that's what I tried to do. And it was not a bad concept at the beginning, but when it came down to it, literally I was going to the escrow company to sign all the final closing documents, and it fell through. Those people backed out of the property because it wasn't fixed. You know, they decided they didn't want to buy it. And for me, I had all of my capital in it, plus my first investor, which was my mom. My mom let me some money for that, but I was out of money at that point, and I wasn't going to get any more money until I sold that house. So it taught me a really valuable lesson about the limitations of your own means. So it's one of the other reasons why I've decided to fund my deals with other people's money, because at the end of the day, if you run out of resources, then you're kind of left holding the bag. So anyway, so 2 main sources: hard money. I fund most of my deals with a combination of hard money and private money. And hard money lenders are basic, just private businesses that have resources of other private individuals who fund their deals. They can close. Are anybody not familiar with hard money? Do I need to go into detail about that? Yeah, okay. Hard money lenders will, they're not like your U.S. bank. They're not your main banks. They're individuals who are used to basically lending on distressed property that needs to be repaired. So that's that way. They will usually lend up to 70 to 90% of the purchase price. They usually want to see some skin in the game on the side of the investor. They usually charge you some kind of points and interest and fees. Some do joint ventures with people, depending on the deal. And they give better rates to people who do more experience or do higher volume and better rates. The thing I really want to focus on tonight is private money and what I call gap funding. So a hard money lender is going to lend you somewhere between 70 to 90% of your purchase price. So the question is, where do you get that other money? Where do you get your 30 to 10 to 30% plus your holding costs and all the other kinds of expenses that come along with doing a project? So they're private individuals. They're in this room right here. They're usually negotiable rates and terms. Once you establish trust, it can be a pretty easy and quick way to fund your deals. So most of my deals have been done with hard money and private, a combination of those two. So the $1 million question or the $30 million question is, how do you find private money, right? Because those are going to be the people who are going to fund your deals. Hard money is a lot easier to find. You can literally go on Google and type in hard money lender Los Angeles, and you're probably going to find 20 or 30. There's tons and tons of them. There's probably, is anybody a hard money lender who's in the room? No. Okay. There's one in the back. So there are people even here tonight. So that's a easier one to find. You can do Google search. You can look for private money. That's a little bit more of a challenge. So, like I said, FIBI and other networking groups, that's one of the primary reasons why I come to this club, is to meet people. Literally every night I come, I meet people who have money that they're looking to put to work. With people who could potentially either find deals for me that I can flip or could fund deals who are private money people. So in this room, there's lots of other FIBI networking events. There are so many resources available online with Meetup, Eventbrite. There's people. Are you familiar with? There's Cash Flow. Cash Flow is a board game. There's lots of groups like that. I used to go to those kinds of club meetings regularly to meet people. Anywhere that you can interact with people. That's a real estate oriented club meeting or not. Bigger Pockets is another resource, online resource. They've got a forum. You can find people all over the country who are looking to invest, looking to flip, looking to do all kinds of different things. LinkedIn is another great place that you can farm from your home to find people who are potentially interested. Like I said, when I got started doing this, I would go to it says 1 to 2, but I think I would go up to like 3 different meetings like this a week in order to go find those people, right? So my goal here tonight is to talk about how do you go from like nothing to something. Well, in the beginning, if you don't have money, you've got your time that you're going to be trading in to go find those things, right? If you don't have the skills, you're going to be trading one of those things. So, there's these are places where you can go find other meetings. There's also you can probably find what's it called? Better Business Bureau meetings would be a place that you could find other people. Business owners are people who have available money that could be looking to invest that. So I would spend 1 to 3 nights a week of my time, probably for a year to 2 years, going and meeting people. Because literally when I'd go to a meeting, I would hope to walk away with one meaningful contact that I could cultivate to hopefully become an investor. These things take time. So when I first got started, I wouldn't expect to see somebody's money actually go into a deal for probably a year, because when I started, I had no experience, which is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Like, how do you overcome that hurdle of having no experience, but still yet get somebody to sign on the line and commit their money into a deal, right? There's definitely some hurdles and obstacles, and I'm going to literally walk you through how I talk to those people, what I share with them to build that credibility, to get somebody to cross over that divide from meeting you to actually putting money into a deal. So I'd spend a lot of time in groups like this. And there's tons of them. In LA, I mean, I'm originally from Eugene, Oregon, which is a small city. There are not very many of these. In LA, you could go out 7 days a week to different meetings like this one and go meet people. You got to spend a lot of time talking to people. So this room, I have raised millions of dollars in this room. Some of my very first investors came in this room. Significant people who have allowed me to do what I've been able to do. And then anywhere else you are, you might not think about this, but like if you're at your kid's school play, or if you're at, like my boys are involved in baseball now, and when I'm talking with people in baseball, I've literally raised money while I'm sitting waiting for my son while he's going through a practice or whatever. There's very natural things that come up when you meet people, right? Which I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about that in a second. So, friends, family, coworkers. When you get started, you're going to have to go where you have your closest connections with people. For me, my mom was my first investor. A grandparent was my second investor. And that allowed me to get started. That was enough money for me to do my first couple of flips. Because when you don't have a track record that you can say, you can't stand up here and say, I've done 95 flips, right? There's a lot of credibility that comes along with that. The conversations that I have with people now are much quicker, and it has a different path than when I got started. But at the beginning, you're looking for people who are willing to take a risk on you. And a lot of times that's going to come with people who are your friends, families, coworkers, and places like that. Like I said, my mom was my number one investor. She helped me buy that house. It had a particular smell to it that most of our houses had. You can't really see it too well in the picture, but other people in FIBI, I just said, yeah, even in this room, I've met people that have had significant places to help me get started. So other places, I've had insurance agents. Again, the conversation, there's very natural. When you meet somebody new, what's one of the first questions that people ask? What do you do, right? So you start sharing, And if you're not doing it, you talk about what you want to do, right? Integrity is a huge, important part of this, but you also have to sell yourself. A few sources for funds, savings, if somebody has a home equity line of credit, if somebody has an IRA, you can convert that IRA to a self-directed IRA, which is a whole topic of its own, where they can invest that money in your deals. There is so much money out in this world looking for good homes and places to be invested. It's staggering. And part of that is a mindset thing. I know when I was getting started, you feel kind of desperate, like you have to find money. You have to find somebody to fund your deals. But the reality is, the more you do this, you realize there are so many people that are sitting on money that all they're getting is like 1% in a bank. So much money out there. There's just an enormous amount of money. So, how do you identify private money when you're talking to people? What's the conversation I have with people, and how do you try to identify, is this somebody that could potentially invest in a deal? So what I try to do is come up with an elevator pitch, which is your short pitch to give somebody a reason to be interested. In this room, it's pretty easy. Most people are here to talk about real estate, right? It's a real estate-oriented club. So when I'm talking to people, I just ask people what they're doing in real estate. What brought you here tonight? Those kinds of conversations are pretty natural when we go into a networking time. But if you're outside of this place and you're at a family event, you can talk about what you're doing, or the books that you're reading, or what you're wanting to go in. You have to start, you have to be casting those seeds out if you want those plants to raise. If you keep quiet, nobody will know. You know, I wrote on here, be salty. You know, when you have your elevator pitch, if you meet somebody, you know, it's like salt, right? If you put too much of it in your food, it spoils it. So you just want to say enough to give people interest in what you're doing. So if you have a full-time job, right, you can't say I'm a full-time investor and I flip houses and all that kind of stuff, but you can say, you know, I work doing X, and on the side, you know, I'm flipping houses, or I work with a group of people who flip houses. You know, you kind of do guilt by association is probably the wrong term, but another beauty of networking, right, is you have associations with people, right? I remember there was a guy early on when I first started doing this who he tried to flip a house by himself and couldn't come up with the funding on his own. And so he brought the deal to me, and we did a joint venture partnership on that deal together, which, by the way, is a good way to get into real estate. If you don't have any experience and you find a deal, find somebody who does have experience and partner with them. They will do that. If it's a good deal, I'll do it.
Would you partner with us?
I would absolutely partner with you. Thank you very much for asking the question. Yeah.
How do you structure your joint ventures?
I will talk about joint ventures a little bit later, and if it doesn't answer your question, why don't you bring it up then? It depends. Joint ventures can be structured a lot of different ways, so it just kind of depends. But you got to share what you're doing. Cash the vision to other people of what you're doing. So most people. So if you have a full-time job, think about what could you say to somebody that could elicit interest, because that's really what you're doing, right? You're throwing out seeds out there, and you don't know which ones are going to grow. You don't know who's interested. You don't know who, you know, where you may find that your Aunt Rita or whatever is sitting on $1 million. Trust me, I found money in places that I did not expect it. So talk to people. Your friends, your coworkers, talk to them about what you're doing, why you're doing it. You start to do that. You start to generate interest. You'll start to know that people are interested because they're going to start asking more and more questions. And then a conversation starts to happen, right, which you then develop into where, you know, that can eventually lead to somebody lending or partnering or all kinds of different ways that you can actually start doing business. So like I said, you're looking for interest. When I come to a meeting like this, if, you know, through that same kind of conversation, I'm looking for somebody who, you know, through those conversations of like, what brought you here? What are you interested in real estate? You know, usually if somebody's got money, that sometimes comes up in the conversation. So, you know, obviously now I have a bigger platform to be able to stand on because of my background and experience, but I'm not trying to sell that person in that moment. I'm just looking to see if there's somebody that I can have a follow-up conversation with. And usually what I'll do is I'll set a follow-up meeting with them where we'll go out to coffee or lunch, where we get into the details. So I try to keep it casual and informal. A lot of times you could think about raising money as like you got to have a PowerPoint presentation and you got to be in a suit and it's like a boardroom. Honestly, I don't think that's really ever happened in any of the conversations that I had. They're usually very, very casual. They're usually very just sitting across the table with somebody, because what I want somebody to do, which I'll go in more detail in just a minute, I want somebody to get to know me, and I want to get to know them. Because one of the big hurdles you're trying to overcome is trust, right? Somebody wants to know, is this somebody that I can trust? Because if you're going to take the money that your hard-earned money and put that into somebody else's deal, you kind of want to know that person is going to do what they say. You want to learn about them. That meeting usually takes about an hour. So if I'm in an event like this, I want to go through and I want to talk to multiple people. I want to find out who are potential people that I could have a follow-up with. Like from all this networking stuff that you guys did, hopefully you got cards. If you don't have cards, that is the cheapest investment in your financial future you can make. It will cost you $15 to go to Office Depot or whatever the name of all of those conglomerate places. You can get cards for super cheap. And it doesn't need to say, I'm super real estate investor or whatever. Mine literally, at the very beginning, it just had my name and my phone number and email, just your basic contact information. You want people to be able to reach out to you, right? There is not a lot of magic to this. This is about humans connecting with humans. I have something, you have something. We're just trying to find that it matches up. So we just try to take some of the mystery away from all of this, I also when I was getting started, I'm going to talk in just a second about I'm honest with people about that I hadn't done any deals, right? So how do you sell that? We'll talk about that in a second. So, right? Hey, you got money. Can I have all your money? I really want to learn how to flip houses, right? That's probably not how you want to do it. So that meeting is you telling your story. Like, how did you get to here? How did you get to the point where you got interested in real estate? You want to tell people. And I am a big proponent of sharing. I'm very open when I talk with people. I tell people the mistakes that I've made. I've also told them the wins that I've made. So, by the way, sharing the mistakes that you made is a really great vehicle for building credibility and trust, because people usually like to, tuck that away, like, oh, I've never made any mistakes. But how many people have made mistakes in this room, right? A couple, right? Yeah, the people who kept your hand down, I don't think they were listening. So, I trust people who are vulnerable and can share those things too. So don't be afraid to be vulnerable. So you want to share things, your credibility, who you are, how you got into real estate, are you competent and trustworthy, who your team is. Other things that investors want to know. This is an important one, right here. You want to answer the question to an investor, how am I not going to lose my money? Right? Investors want to make money, but they don't want to lose money. That's a really important one. And how I go through my process, I really try to answer those questions before they even come up. They also want to know how they're going to make money, and they don't want to know how their money is protected. Because a lot of times when you're getting started, I'll be honest, like most of my investors when I got started probably had between $50,000 and $100,000. Some people might have had less than that. And those people, that's hard-earned money that they've saved up, and now they're trying to grow it at the next level. So those people, you want to know how, if you've spent 10 years coming up with $50,000, you don't want to lose that money. So that's an important piece when you're talking to them. So when you have that follow-up conversation, you're trying to build an investor profile on what those people are. I want to know things about people who are interested to lend money. I want to know, what do they have? This is actually more of a pre-question in a networking meeting. Do they have money, time, or do they have experience? Because if you have one of those three things, you can do deals in real estate. But when you're getting into more of a detailed conversation with a potential investor, you kind of want to know what their tastes are. Are they into security versus equity? And what I mean by that is, are they on a spectrum? There's a spectrum of being conservative, a risk spectrum of people who are really conservative and people who are really open to taking risk. So security would be some kind of a guaranteed position where they're not necessarily going to make a huge amount of upside on a deal, but they're going to make more than they're making other places, and they're not going to lose their money. Where an equity position in a deal would be something like profit sharing, things like that, where people are going to both take a portion of maybe profits as well as an increased place in risk in a deal. So, and whether they're passive or whether they're interested in a passive or active investment role. Because there's times I talk to people, somebody may have a lot of money. That person, they really want to be in a deal. That's not necessarily I will categorize that person as maybe somebody who'd want to do a joint venture, right? So as you're talking to people, you find somebody who's got money, you got to think about like what is the right place for that person, you know, because if you don't have something that matches what they're looking for, then it's not going to be a good fit for both of you. And there's plenty of people out there. You can create a win-win where you put people in positions where they get what they are looking for and you get what you're looking for. And that's by far the best way to do it. So you want to ask people what their goals are, both in the long term and in the short term. Because if you've got somebody you got to look at the stage of life that somebody's in. If somebody's in the later stages of life, you know, as somebody who's going to ask somebody to put money in a deal, you got to be thinking about like potential for them to lose that money. You know, so is that, you know, it's ultimately their decision where they're going to invest their money, but you kind of have to have a conscience with this too. If somebody can't stand to lose money, you shouldn't invite them to a project where they could stand to lose that money. So I'm kind of trying to think through that when I meet people. And ultimately, I'm going to let that investor tell me what what they're interested for. So what they're interested to be involved in. Because sometimes you can't make that decision for them. So you're looking to build a win-win scenario with them. So really, it's just about matching up what you have and what they have. And if you guys are aligned, then it can really become a beautiful thing. And again, we're talking about how do you get from nothing to 95 in 7 years. It's about doing that, right? Because the beauty of it is when you find an investor, you pair them with a investment where they make money and they get the kinds of returns that they're looking for. You know what happens? That deal comes over. It goes over. They get their money back. They got paid. The next time you have a deal, is it going to get harder or is it going to get easier for you to raise money? Right? It's like a snowball effect. Right? You take care of people along the way. You put them in places that meets their needs. They come back. You know, they come back to you. So this is kind of the script that I go through when I go through that meeting, which I don't follow a script because I try to keep it natural, and I've been through it so many times that I don't have to really think about it. But you know, I'm trying to continue to get to know them and build rapport, identify their goals to see if we're a good match, which are things that we just talked about. I'll step out of the way if you want to take pictures. I'm trying to build a risk profile on that person. Is this person somebody who's looking to put more skin in the game, or is this person looking for a more conservative position? Then, so let's get into the meat. What my goal, how I am selling myself when I'm meeting somebody is this next step, which is where I basically just walk somebody through my business model of how I think, because I want them to know what goes on in my mind, because their money's getting invested in what goes through my mind here. So I walk them through how I go about finding deals, which I'll tell you. We find deals we do some direct mail, primarily to probates. We have a bunch of real estate agents that we've developed relationships with over the last 7 years. And I have wholesalers who find deals for me. That's essentially how I continue to find deals. When I started, if I didn't have that direct marketing campaign, I would not be in business today. But so I explain to them how I find deals. I want them to understand what it is and why it is that I do what I do. Because one of those hurdles that you're going to overcome is if people don't understand something, they're not going to invest, right? So you want to remove those hurdles of understanding why this makes sense. They want to see that there's a good, solid business plan behind this, right? And this really goes for any kind of fundraising that you're going to do, whether it's for a car wash or whatever, right? Understanding what you're investing in, how that business operates is important. You know, how I analyze deals. Yeah?
What percentage comes from wholesalers, from mailers, and from agents for you?
It varies year by year. I would say I probably get maybe 20 to 25% from mailers, and probably the other two are split 50-50 on the rest of it. But it does vary from year to year. Some years they'll change, but yeah.
And your mailers, are they hyper-local? Do you stick to a certain amount of homes?
I mail to every probate that gets listed in LA County. That's the only mailer I do. And what?
Are they yellow letters? Or?
No, they're ones that I have kind of custom done and have a way that make people think that it's a personal letter that's been given to them. And it's written, there's not a whole lot of magic to how it's written. It's very simple. I'm a huge believer in keeping things simple. I explain that I'm an investor, that I buy property, I'm looking to buy property. And I don't get calls from a lot of them, but I do get calls from enough of them that it's paid for itself, 10 times over every year that I do it. So.
You find those are your better deals when you do for property?
Profit-wise, they can be, but some of that comes down to negotiation, because you're talking principal to buyer to seller directly with people, as opposed to when you're buying properties off the MLS, which the MLS, I don't know if I even said the MLS.
No.
I mean, I said agents, which is mostly through MLS. We do have agents who will have off-market deals. I buy a lot of houses off the MLS, which is crazy. Because you can't buy houses off the MLS, right? That's what everybody says. But I keep doing it. So, but yeah.
Yes, have you ever purchased any pre-tax deeds?
I have never done a tax deed.
Like before they go into that state offer?
I'm not that sophisticated. I'm kind of like I've got a big hammer and I hit things with hammers. And I hit enough things that I get enough deals. So, those are like mysterious, like tax, before a house goes into foreclosure from the taxes, you can make offers. I've done a mailer before to tax foreclosures that were going to happen here in LA, but I never bought anything off of that. So I bought a number of bankruptcies this year. That's an interesting new little niche. So any other questions? Feel free to ask questions. If you got them, that's
Outside of LA County, do you go further south at all, or do you just
for the marketing or buying.
for buying?
I've bought I've bought in San Diego. I've bought in Bakersfield. I've bought in Riverside, San Bernardino. I've bought in
You don't have, like, a
Palmdale.
sweet spot, you just kind of look.
No, when I got started, I was doing probate mailing, which is county-wide. So probate is what happens to an estate when people pass away. They go through the process of probate. So they're liquidating the assets and paying off creditors and things like that. So that's kind of where I got started. I literally get leads all over LA County. So I got used to doing that. So I got used to analyzing deals all over the place. And again, through networking, meeting people. I mean, I can't tell you how insignificant some of the meetings were when I met somebody. I'm not saying anything bad about the person, but it just didn't feel like it. There was no unicorns or rainbows. There was no, blue smoke in the room or flashing lights. But one of the first agents that I started doing deals with, I found the first house that I bought with. I was driving in Covina or West Covina, and on a whim, I stopped at an open house. And that whim, I bought like 7 or maybe 9 houses with that agent. I mean, I literally just walked in, talked to the guy for like 5 to 10 minutes, told him I was an investor. And by the way, I had never bought a house before, right? I don't know if you've ever seen The Secret, but you got to send it out to the universe, whatever your belief is. If you want to buy stuff, you got to talk like somebody who does it or somebody who wants to do it. You need to tell people need to see that you're serious about this, right? So be serious about it, right? If you really want to buy a house, you see an open house, freaking stop your car, talk to an agent. Agents they control like what percentage of deals go through agents, would you guess? Yeah, a huge amount. The vast majority go through the MLS and through agents. So meet agents. Can I tell people who you are?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This is one of my agents. We bought houses together. So get to know him, but he gives the deals to me. No, I'm just kidding.
But you have a specific range. He has more deals than just.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Right. I'm actually not a huge competition guy. I really believe there's enough. I mean, anybody ever flown into LA at night? If anybody thinks there's not enough houses out there, you really need to spend like $100 and fly to Las Vegas and come back at night. It's mind-boggling. There are so many houses here. So many houses.
It
And
takes 20 minutes to fly over LA just to get to the
yeah, and like 1% of them are for sale right now. You know, they're just, I made that up completely. The 1% part. But there are so many houses. There is no lack of inventory out there. There's a lack of creativity and a lack of willingness to go find it, right? You want to be a real estate investor, you're going to have to work for it. You know, it's not easy. If it were easy, everybody would do it and everybody would be successful. Usually what happens is you get out, you get excited, you get out, you try, and you fail, and you stop. The biggest hurdle to becoming successful is stopping, right? How many stories have we heard about Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or anybody else who's run a Fortune 500 company or all these major people who've been successful? Perseverance is a huge part of it. You just got to keep getting up. Before I did my first deal, I spent like 2 or 3 years going to networking events, and it was so painful for me because I wanted to have a deal so bad I could taste it. I wanted a deal so bad. And people would get up at those events and they would talk about the deals that they were doing, and it just hurt me in like the core of my being because I wanted it so bad. And I just kept doing it, just kept going, kept networking. I don't care, you know, if this takes you 10 years to figure out, I will tell you, it is absolutely worth whatever amount of time it takes. Everybody's got different processes. Everybody has different life events that may slow you down, right? I've had a lot of kids, you know. That gets in the way of my success. But I've had to find ways. My wife is still married to me. We still talk, you know, it's still good. There's challenges. Life is filled with challenges. But just keep going, keep taking steps. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the next step. And if it takes, like I said, if it takes you 10 years, it will change your life. Real estate is an amazing field that can absolutely change your life. Okay, but we're here to talk about money, right? Because that's an important one. I could talk a lot about a lot of different things. So I'm trying to stay focused here. Okay, here's the other question. Yeah.
Just wanted to step a real quick question.
Yeah.
How you're structuring a loan.
Yeah.
Was it ever offered to your investors a deed in lieu if something went wrong?
I have never, it's a deed in lieu of foreclosure, right? If you can't pay, you can basically give the property back so that they don't foreclose on you. I have never done that. No. I have always paid every investor. I'm going to tell you a story, a not so pretty story in just a second.
That previous screen, because you had talked about
Yeah.
the note, the DOT, the title insurance, what is that?
Okay, we'll get to that in just a second. I don't think I didn't finish this, so let me kind of blow through this. If I don't go into depth, talk to me afterwards. I'll stay as long as you guys want to. So I share my business process with somebody, right? Because if you have money and you want to invest with somebody, you want to make sure that that person knows what they're doing. They've thought through it. There's a methodology to it. There are systems in place, right? Wouldn't that all make you feel better if you were going to invest your money? So do that to your people. You're going to explain to them why you do what you do, how you do it. I explain to them how I analyze deals, how I look at comps, comparable home sales, to come up with my after repair value. I'm using data, real world data of homes that have sold in the last 3 to 6 months to determine what the value of my house is going to be. It's not like I have a machine that I just reach into a bag to come up with a number. I'm using data to determine that number. I'm also showing them that I'm taking a more realistic approach, that I'm not, you know, if all the comps say it's going to sell for $300,000, not that anything sells for $300,000 anymore, but it did 7 years ago, you know, that if I'm tacking $50,000 onto that, they can see that you're maybe not being as conservative as you could be. So this is answering the question of how am I not going to lose my money, you know? How we prepare for the worst case scenario, right? Because that's one of the biggest questions that come up is like, you know, what happens if the market turns? That's almost word for word what everybody says, almost. So the thing I'll tell them is the first place that I protect my investor. I'm not talking about me making money here. I'm talking about how I protect my investor. The first place I protect my investor, one, are these things. All the thought gone in before I even buy a house. But beyond that is going to be that I have a reasonable profit margin in my deal, right? My profit margin is somewhere between 8 to 10% of the net sales price of the property. Okay? That's a simplistic way to look at it, but because I have a more detailed calculator to go through. But that's basically what I'm looking for as my net profit after all expenses. Because if the market turns, that's the first lever I have to get rid of this property so that I don't lose money, and then worse, so to protect my investors so they don't lose their money, right? Because the market, if it does turn, values don't change overnight. So it's a lever that I have that I can give an incentive by lowering the price. Right? That makes sense? I also protect my investor by doing due diligence. Right? I know that house before I buy it. I've been in that house. I've physically inspected that house, or someone on my team has physically inspected that house. We've had contractors go through it, and we usually have bids, and we have our rehab worked out before we go into that. We also carry insurances, right? That's another protection for your investor. I have insurance for fire. I have insurance that covers vandalism. And then I put an alarm system in the houses that we do also. And I've had lots of houses that have been broken into. But I have had one of the very first houses, right? You learn through your mistakes. One of the very first houses I had, I got broken into all the time. And then I learned about these simplysafe.com, great alarm systems. Cost $25 a month to run. It's cheap, and it has a little cell phone basically inside of it that will have monitoring and everything. So they'll call the cops for you. And you can control it from your phone. I can turn it on and off from my apps, which is pretty awesome. So, and then how I structure the loan. Now, I'm talking about private money, and how I do that mostly is I will borrow that money as a loan. So I will secure that money by putting a note and a deed of trust on the property, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in a minute. And then at the end of the deal, so I'll go explain that. A note basically is that's the terms of the agreement. I'm going to borrow X number of dollars. I'm going to pay X number of interest. It's going to be for X number of months. We don't actually use X. We put real numbers in those, and all that. So, and then the deed of trust, that is a little more generic. That just says there's a lien against the property. That gets filed with the county so that when I go to sell it, I can't take your money, right? I use an escrow company. I try to do everything above board, right? Because what you want, the one thing you're trying to develop is trust. Because if you develop trust with an investor, they will continue to invest with you. If you have integrity, you do things where you don't even put people in positions where you can take their money, right? So their money doesn't come to me. It goes to an escrow company. When the property closes, the escrow company gives it to me. When I go to sell the property, the money goes back to escrow, and escrow gives it back to the investor. It doesn't touch my bank account until it's secured by that deed of trust. There's also title insurance, which will secure their position, their loan position, and if there's a title claim on the property. So those are all things that I will try to explain to somebody to give them comfort. Like, these are things that have been put into place in order to protect you. And then at the end, I mean, I'll simply ask if it's something that they're interested to move forward. Are they interested to find out about, I'll probably word it exactly like this. Are you interested to find out when I have another project? And most of the time, the answer is yes. Because obviously, we've spent an hour. These people are pretty well qualified by that point. And that's kind of how it is. I never try to sell anybody at that meeting. I'm not trying to sell a deal. I don't think I have ever once taken a specific deal and tried to raise money. Because if you chase money, it runs away. You always need to be raising money. It takes time to develop, and you don't want to be in a position of need when you're dealing with an investor. You have to be in a position of strength. Otherwise, you're going to end up giving away the farm, and somebody else is going to have all the control. And you don't want to be in that position. It's going to be very difficult and painful, and it's hard to get that back in the box when you've kind of given that back over. So how did I raise money for my first deal? Because I had no experience, right? What I didn't have was experience. But what I basically sold that project on is what I did have, right? I had, Rich Dad Education was the company that I spent $30,000 on to go. Please don't do that. Talk to me. I will point you to other resources. But it worked. It worked, so I'm happy. I sold them on my business plan, which is what I just basically walked you through. I showed them my methodology of how I'm going to make money. And I shared that with them. And then another huge one, when you don't have experience, I sold the experience of my team. So I had a contractor who was my project manager. By the way, this was a house in Oregon, so it was 1,000 miles away from, I live here, and it was 1,000 miles away. So I had a contractor who was on the ground who I sold it on his experience, that he was the person who knew how to do the building and all that, right? I didn't know how to do the building. I had training, but I didn't know how to do that. So he was the person who was bringing that expertise. So you don't have to have all of the expertise. What you need to do is have a team that has the expertise, right? So that's what you're selling when you don't have it. So if you're here in this room and you want to do a flip, or whatever that is, it could be a lot of different things. You need to find people who have the expertise that you lack, or and continue to develop it on your own. And I showed them the data. That's the comps. I showed them pictures, bids, etc. It was the same stuff we just talked about. So, what's that?
You had training?
Yeah, I went through a big real estate investment training.
How would you bring it into the conversation?
I would just talk. I would tell them how I spent I think it was $35,000. It was on credit cards, by the way. I didn't have the money in yeah, that was fun. But it's all paid off now. So balance transfers are a thing. But I'll tell you what, it gave me a lot of motivation. I actually don't tell people to go do that. But on the other hand, I look at my own story. When I signed up for that, I put a line in the sand, and I stepped over that line, and I tell you what, I was not going back. And I had Amex's skin in the game. I had a lot of reasons. Every month I was reminded when I was paying those credit cards. I don't recommend you do that, okay? I'm just saying that's what I did. That's why there's the disclaimer at the beginning that says don't do what I said, but it worked for me. Hey. So this is what that house looked like. That is moss on the roof. Boy, can you turn the lights off for just a second? You got to see the inside of this. Do you see that wood paneling? A beautiful wood paneling? Yeah. Nice. That's what it looked like when it was done. Yeah, you can turn the lights back on. That was a pain in the butt project. So here's what happens when it all goes wrong. So I sold it all to my investors. We did that as an LLC. It was my first time. So when you're getting started, you are probably not going to get all the profits yourself. You're probably going to have to share, right? And that's okay, right? You got to look at it as baby steps. So in order to do this deal, this group of investors, I think I had 4 investors who came on as members of an LLC. I have not ever done this kind of a deal structure since, because it's a little complicated. We formed an LLC. 4 of them came in as voting members of the LLC. And then another person came on as a lender.
We're just appreciating it. 4 voting members in your LLC.
Yeah. I was the managing member, but when you have members of an LLC, those people have rights. They can vote. They could replace me as the managing member. None of them wanted to, which I knew I was in a pretty decent position, but.
Good conversation. I mean, that just talks to the depth of the importance of you having had a transparency.
Yeah, we knew each other.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
Of being able to say, yes, I know what I'm intending to do, and I'm staying in conversation with you, you know I'm doing it.
Yeah.
They have the power to decide to have to submit.
Yeah, they can sue me too. One was a family member, one was a previous coworker, and 2 people were people that I'd met through that real estate training company. And then the lender was somebody I met in this room, and who has invested in lots of my deals ever since. So this one went wrong. So let me tell you what a deal going wrong looks like, because this is another part of it, right? If you're going to borrow people's money, you're responsible for that money, and you have to be I'm not trying to scare people, but stuff happens, right? We've all heard, you can all go watch the flip or flop shows. You know, they usually don't show you bad stories, right? That's bad TV. So let me tell you what real good TV looks like. So that one in the first week, my $8,000 roof turned into a $21,000 roof because we missed that the 100% asbestos roof from the original roof from the 40s, which get battered in Oregon with all the rain, not only was the roof bad, but all of the wood supporting the roof was bad. So we had to completely rebuild the roof. So that was fun. And $8,000, though, Oregon's great because that included the asbestos remediation, too. So that's cheap. Our budget went from $70,000 to $120,000 by the time we were done. That was fun. The capital call, that means you ran out of money and you need to talk to your investors to get more, right? Because there's a bit of a difference between those 2 numbers. So how that deal was structured, again, at the beginning, you're going to have to find creative ways that people are going to feel comfortable. Somebody told me at the very beginning when I was starting to raise money, it's like, do whatever it takes to make your investors protected and comfortable. You want to earn big underscore earn their trust, right? That first project, you may not make any money. But if you earn their trust, it can become a second project and a third project. And now you're starting to build a track record. And I tell you what, it's a lot easier to have those conversations when you've done 2 or 3 deals. It's a lot easier to do it when you've done 95, right? But you don't get to 95 until you get to 2 or 3, right? So whatever it takes. Now, you don't want to give it all away, and you want to make sure you're protected, but yeah.
What was your order on that as far as, did you start the LLC with the people, and then you went out and found the property, or did you find
Oh, I had the property already. I had the property under contract. I had been cultivating these relationships prior to it. So again, that's why I was spending all that time going out and meeting people and networking, because you got to have the money kind of lined up a little bit before you've got your deal, right? It's hard at the beginning, right? It's like eating an elephant. You got to do everything. You got to go find the deal. You got to find the funding for the deal. When you get the deal, you got to find people to fix the deal. Then when you fix the deal, eventually it gets done. Then you got to sell the deal. And, you know, it's like there's so many steps to it. It does get a lot easier. And I take that for granted now because I've been through it so many times. But you always have to be raising money, right? You always got to be raising money because you may have talked to somebody 3 months ago and their life may have changed and now they don't have that available capital. So you always got to be raising money. You can never have too many people that you can call to be able to raise that money because you don't want to be chasing money. So you want to give somebody an opportunity to invest and they need to be able to say no. And then you can't really come back and beg. That's not a good position to be in. You want to have other people that you can go to because if you become dependent, then it can be challenging for you to run your business. So in this one, we had to raise money twice. This was structured that they funded 100% of the deal funds up front for the deal. So if everything went off as we had originally planned, I wouldn't have had to come up with any money. But if any more extra money was needed, then to the percentage that you owned the LLC, you had to fund the deal. And I think I owned like 47 or 48%. So I don't know how much that is. It's like 60,000, 50,000 of that. Basically half of that had to come out of my pocket. And that's what made them comfortable, right? Because how do you control your spending if somebody doesn't have a track record? That was a way to make them feel comfortable that, hey, if things went wrong, I was gonna have to dig deep in my pockets too, in order to make that happen. So took over a year to sell. That was fun. Yeah, it was painful to get to the point. My project manager was an alcoholic, which I did not know that. I had known this guy for a long time. I didn't know he's an alcoholic till he started drunk dialing me and calling me drunk. So I had to fire him. I had to fly up to Oregon and fire him and find somebody else to take over. That was fun. What else? I lost $50,000 on that deal. That was fun. My investors, right, if you're a member of an LLC, you're on the hook. Like they were on the hook to lose 20% of their principal that they invested with me. That was not fun. But they took a 4% loss on that. I buffered their loss because I had made money in other deals. They did take a small loss, but that's the only loss that my investors have ever taken. But they were on the hook for a lot bigger number. And they were very grateful. And to be honest, the people who have been investing with me from there, they've all invested substantially more. So it's your job to insulate your investors from the drama, and it's your job to fix the problems when that happens. So,
Sorry, quick question.
yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned it, but how early on was that deal?
That was my first flip. Yeah. And I'm still here. They haven't found me yet. Just kidding.
You made money on other deals.
Yeah. So that first deal was, I got that under contract in 2012, probably in October. We bought it in December. I sold it like the next year, December 28th. So I got to realize that loss that year, which was great. That was the one good thing.
How many deals did you?
And in between that, I did 6 deals. 2 of them were flips, 4 of them were wholesale. One of those wholesale deals I made $60,000 on.
Wow.
I made like $120,000 in wholesale deals that coming year. And I did 2 flips. I only did 2 flips because that's all the money I had to deal with. I had my mom and I had my grandpa. They funded those 2 flips because they were about 6 months apart. When one was sold, the money got rolled into another. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got a lot more slides, but yeah. Who's still, what was the question?
And they still talk to you?
Oh, they love me. I'm making money. These investors who were involved in that deal, they've all reinvested with me, substantially more. So once I've had that conversation, back to kind of what we were talking about, the process, I pitch that deal. When I get to the point where I have a deal, what I do is I put together what I call a pro forma package, which I'm going to show you. It's about 7 slides long. And then I call them to let them know that they have that in their inbox and ask them if they have any questions and ask them if they want to invest. Sometimes they may tell me right then and there. Sometimes they might, I might call them back in a day or so. At the beginning, you got to give more time for that to happen. Now I literally, it's very, very simple. I call and they say, yeah, what's the next one? It gets very easy. When you do it right, you treat people right, you take care of them, you make them money, they like it when you call. Usually the numbers that they invest get bigger. I'm never pushy, right? I am not begging for money. What I'm doing is I'm giving someone an opportunity to make money. And that's an important thing because that's a mindset thing. There's a lot of sales methodology to this, but you're not begging somebody for money. You know that you might need the money, especially if you're at the beginning. What you're doing is you're creating an opportunity. And it's a really cool position to be in because you can watch that benefit other people's lives. Because there's a lot of money out there that's looking for good places to be. This process used to take me about 2 weeks or so to raise the money for a deal. Now it takes me 2 calls, if that. Sometimes it's 1 call. I'll just say, hey, here's the next deal. It's much easier. Yeah?
Do you usually do a lot of 1031 exchanges, or you take the hit on the
I've never done a 1031 exchange. I pay taxes. They're short term, so it would be really challenging to do 1031 exchanges as flips.
So you do it under a year, so you get the short-term capital gain?
Yeah, I pay earned income, which I'm doing more now that have longer plays to avoid that because I like paying less taxes. Yes?
If you have multiple
secure the loan position?
With a note and a deed of trust?
Yeah. But
That's just like your bank. If you get a mortgage, it's the same two
it's like a second
instruments. Yeah, if there's a hard money lender in first, they're in first position. Then a private money person, they'd be a secondary position. I mean, I've done more than that.
If you do a note, then they don't have a position. You could structure it.
You can do a non-secured note, and that would not have a recorded thing, but I don't ask people to do that. I always will secure their position as a lien against the property. I have done it for a few family members, but that's because there's a close tie there.
Right, but
So
how do you guarantee that they all have the same position?
they don't have the same position.
Number 6 is going to be less happy than number 1.
That's how it works. The bigger the money, the better the position. So now I'm in a position where I'm replacing a lot of those hard money loans, and I'm just using private money. So that's where it is. It's like you start small, you're building, right? It's building. It gets bigger. The snowball gets bigger. And eventually you can remove that hard money. Because I don't pay very much for my hard money, but I can eliminate even the fees that I pay for my hard money because I can use private money now. I have used different note brokers in the past. A lot of times I write them. I have my escrow company will write notes. Escrow and title companies will write notes and deeds of trust for you, sometimes for free. So let me show you what my pro forma package looks like. Can you hit the lights for just 1 second? So there's an opening page, but then I show the property address, a little bit about what we're doing, a picture, a little bit about the property's specs, then what we're going to do in the rehab. See, it's not super detailed, but it's detailed enough to kind of know what it is. And honestly, most of the time, once they get to know you, they just kind of trust you, and they don't even, I don't know if they look too much at this stuff. I show them some before pictures of what the property looks like and how they do. Yes, they do. They do. I will not. I'll try not to speak for other people then. The beautiful before, just awesome. It's like what more could you do to make it beautiful? And I show them my comps because I'm showing them my justification. I've already shown them that this is how my process works, and then I show them what I'm looking to raise. How much I'm looking to get from them, and kind of what that would look like. Usually these are about 5 to 6 months long, kind of a projection as to what their interest rate would be. And then my contact information, which I'll leave you all at the very end of this. So, and if you want to see what that house looked like afterwards, that's what it looked like. Not bad, right? All right, you can turn the lights back on. Boy, I know, I got to cut it off.
Sorry, we gotta cut you off, dude.
Yeah.
It's funny when we talked earlier. You were like, oh, do I really have? I don't know if I have enough information to fill an hour. Really? I don't think so. Get it. You'll find it.
Yeah.
Just fine.
This is like maybe a third of the way, or half the way through.
Maybe we'll have you come back and do specifically how to deal with deals, how you structure the deals. But it's after 9 o'clock, so I'm gonna do a close. Hey, give me a hand, guys.
Yeah.